Welcome to the Michigan Golfer Show. Join us each week as we explore the people, the places, and the events that shape our great game.
Hi, I'm Jack Berry, and I am out at Eastern Michigan University's Eagle Crest Golf Resort, and talking to Tom Durant, who is the man who's behind the camera all the time and sending out all those good pictures on Michigan golf. Now, you had some top hosts for the program, and I think one of them was a friend of mine, Tom Cleary.
Yes, Tom was actually the host of Golfing Michigan. That was the very first series that was on broadcast television. He was at the time the sportscaster for WZZM in Grand Rapids, and of course one of our flagship stations for the show the first year. So we didn't have many flagship stations, but we were happy to have them on board. That's for sure.
Yeah, well, Tom's at Grand Valley doing all the voice work and all their sports.
He was a great host. He really was. He loved the game of golf for one thing. He loved it, and you could tell because he knows it. He was a good golfer, and he always his delivery was there was never a mistake. We never really had to back up to cover an edit or something or whatever.
Well, I was always a little ticked off that he didn't push for the job down at Golf Channel, because he would have been perfect for them. Into the second season, and it's now time for Golfing the Great Lakes. Tom, take it away.
Okay. Well, after a whirlwind first year, we knew that we had something. It was a slow start, of course, being on broadcast. So the second year, we decided we would try it and see if we couldn't put together a network on public television. And we were fortunate to have top talent when it comes to a host. Frank Beckmann was our host for the first year, and he was just dynamite. He's strong. He has a good voice. It was, yeah, and he was great to work with. I have to share this story, but we were out at Black Wolf Run doing a course, and
kind of a famous golf.
Yeah, it is. But the golfers came up behind us, and we always used to let them play through before we would shoot the hole. And Frank started talking, and this one guy looked at him, kept looking at him, and he said, "Are you Frank Beckmann?" And he said, "Yeah." He says, "Where have you seen me before?" He says, "I haven't, but I've heard you enough times." And a lot of people would just recognize him by his voice. And that also helped with advertising, because Frank Beckmann, now people started to take us serious. They've got something together here, and I believe that was the year that we had Jeep Eagle was one of the sponsors, and I think Big Boy came in maybe. I'm not sure of exactly how the relationship came, but we did better with the revenue side of things and it was because of Frank.
Well, Frank was on WJR, 50,000 watts.
Well, and that didn't hurt us either, because during that time, when Frank was just coming in and Tom Cleary was just leaving, we were fortunate enough to have an interview with J.P. McCarthy on his afternoon show. And Tom talked about the show. I was there too, but I was scared to death to say anything at the time. And fortunately, Tom Cleary carried well. And of course, JP he loved the game of golf. And then that was when, of course, that Frank Beckmann made the transition into Golfing the Great Lakes, because we wanted to expand out of Michigan. The advertisers wanted more than just Michigan. It was really strange. Unfortunately, we couldn't get the state. Yeah, well, we couldn't get the state the first year because their markets were different than what ours were. Well, so be it, I guess. But anyway, it went on, and that was a really good year because Frank did a great job, easy to direct. And of course, it's like anybody, he has to get familiar with me so that he knew what I was doing. And then once he started seeing the show and the products that were coming out, he was much more comfortable in letting me have the reins, so to speak.
Well, now I saw a picture of you hanging out of the WJR helicopter. What was that? Now,
Ypsilanti started its Heritage Festival back in those days, and my wife and I were in charge of the parade. And I thought, wow, it'd really be fun to have the WJR helicopter do aerials or whatever if they would, because I used to hire them to do shots where they would take the door off, and I would sit on the floor and film out the door while they flew around doing golf courses, including this place, by the way. I can remember hovering over the lake as they were clearing the way for that island golf course green out there. Anyway, it was really fantastic, and like I said, I love to fly in anything. As long as it's got an engine and it works, I'm good.
So, did you have any other unusual problems where you had to get behind the camera and with one hand and with the other one to hold on to something, or what?
Back in those days, because the cameras were 26 pounds, it wasn't like what you have today, and you know, where it's a little GoPro that you can stick in your pocket and get high definition pictures or whatever the case may be. And plus the fact that the recording system was on 3/4 inch tape, and that was a separate unit, so it was an umbilical cord between myself and my grip, so to speak. I would usually do most of the camera work. But then, as time went on, we had a staff. My editor also doubled as the cameraman, Paul Siskey.
Well, you've gone from the buggy days to to the big powered machines now.
One of the things, and I think this was in Galena, they always. Yeah, Galena, Illinois. I can't remember the name of the course, but it was a beautiful golf course. Eagle Ridge? Okay, Eagle Ridge. Okay. And they wanted to get Frank on a horse. And there were two things that Frank... Well, yeah. Two things that Frank doesn't like: airplanes and horses. Okay? And what happened was he got on the horse, and the horse instantly knew that this guy was afraid of him. And it started going, and of course we were rolling tape on this because we thought this was really fun. All you could hear is "Whoa, Bessie! Whoa, Bessie!" as he headed off into the sunset.
Well, I do have a Frank Beckmann story from, we were both covering the Rose Bowl that Michigan, I think, won that year, and there's a golf course right next to the Rose Bowl, and we're playing, and of course it gets dark real fast out there. 5 o'clock, it is deadly dark, and we're behind some guys that Frank thought weren't moving fast enough. So he takes a shot, and he can really rip it. And this guy is up, "Hey, I hope you've got a lawyer." He's really, and we get up there, and then he sees how big Frank is. Whoa, that changed a lot. Things were all okay.
Oh, gosh. So we had a good time. It was hard work. Frank, we did have what we called a trade for mention on an airplane out of Willow Run, which really saved a lot of time, especially when we were having to cross the lake. But I can remember one particular instance as we were heading over to film a show. The pilot didn't get our door closed completely, and we were in the middle of Lake Michigan, and the door popped open, and I didn't realize that it has a second catch on it, but Frank was not a happy camper, and neither was I, for that matter. And so all of a sudden, and the pilot wasn't used to this particular aircraft, so he got the manual out to figure out what to do, and it said to slow down. Well, if we're over Lake Michigan, I said, you do not slow down until you see land on the other side. I will hold the door closed as much as I can. So we did that, and we got over to the other side. We slowed down to a particular speed, and we were able to lock the door and land safely. But that was a bit of a scary episode. Frank never flew with us again after that.
And then you went from Frank to another top Detroit guy, Larry Adderley, who was Channel 7 man. And a Michigan State Spartan, I might add.
What's that?
He's a Spartan also.
Anyway, we really miss Frank, but at that time he was getting to be real busy with his outside work, and he just didn't have the time to go on. So we kind of scrambled around. We came across another jewel, who was a Detroit television personality, Larry Adderley. And he, of course, loved golf. And I said, man, I don't think he's going to be interested at all. But I remember going to a hotel in Detroit that we met at. He said he wanted to talk with us about it. And I walked out of there with a new host. I couldn't believe it. He was excited about the show. And he was really good in television. He taught me a lot about setups and different transitions. I can remember one that was being a video guy, you probably wouldn't appreciate it, but he started to introduce this hole, and he walked off camera to this side, came around behind me, and closed it by coming in on the other side. And it was really a cool transition into that hole. We did some crazy things. We would try to have, since this was what we call film style, it was a single camera shoot, we would get his tee shots all the time. Sometimes they weren't great, but they were always great on the second shot. And what we would do is that we would take the camera out, and then off camera, we would have somebody throw the ball out onto the course. And then we would follow the ball. He said, God, great shot, And it worked. Editing was amazing. But generally, Larry was right on. And we had wireless mics that were unbelievable. Sometimes we could reach him as far away as 150 yards and still get great audio off the tee when we would set up from behind the tee. And again, the show kept growing, and I think at the end we had about 35 markets with markets meaning stations that had committed to airing the show on a regular basis. And that was that was about 11 million households, and that was pretty good sized network.
Well, you were pioneers in this, right?
Well, we were bigger than the Golf Channel was at that time, so it was pretty heady stuff, I guess, right? That we didn't realize that though until the show, went off the air several years later, and then we started getting calls from these stations. Where's my golf show? Aren't you doing the golf show? And unfortunately, a lot of people thought that we were funded by PBS, but that wasn't the case. We had to work real hard. Art, bless his heart, did most of the sales of advertising, and that was the only way we could exist.
Yeah, they don't have too much in the cash drawer, the PBS.
No, it has to be a national program, and it was a great opportunity for us, because I can tell you that if you're watching television, I don't care what you're watching it on, what network, if you like the show, people are going to watch. So it didn't matter whether it was on ABC, CBS, NBC, or PBS. If they liked the show, they were going to watch it, and that's really what happened because our numbers proved that out. In Detroit, which was one of the only stations that had Nielsen ratings, at one point our Nielsen ratings were higher than Antiques Roadshow. So we came on at a good time. I think it was a Saturday morning show, and it was at 9 o'clock, I believe. They tried us in the evenings, but it wasn't as successful because they seemed to like the Saturday time slot.
Good. Well, they could probably show it at some of the golf courses. Have it on the TV in the pro shop.
Well, that was the other thing too that I should. One other thing too is that we always got at least a second airing and sometimes 3 and 4 airings of that same show during the week, which was phenomenal.
Well, Golf Channel does that with Faraday. It's on Monday nights and every day of the week afterwards, it seems like. Well, Tom, you were a busy man, something like 85 golf courses. Now, you have to have some memories of some of them, and you've got a little sheet there that can tell you, you and I need that. And so, what were some of your favorites?
Well, there were a lot of favorites. It's just almost like the next course was my favorite. Yeah, right. Yeah, and Trent Jones taught me all about that. So, anyway, I think some of the Garland courses were always so well manicured, and it was such a pretty area up there. I always enjoyed those. The eagle that was nesting up there, and would come down into the pond and grab a fish whenever he felt like eating dinner, and those were really neat experiences.
Well, you were at Boyne for the Alpine course, which was Everett Kircher's first golf course.
It was a pleasure to meet him and have an interview with him and talk about the courses.
He had skiing. That's where skiing paid the bills, and he had a lot of folks without anything to do in the summertime. So a friend of his said, "Well, why don't you build a golf course?"
And he told us all about that. He said that's how he got into golf, and he said we just had to have something to do with our employees and our time during the summertime. So what a way. I think he developed 5 different courses up there?
Well, 2 of them at the Alpine, and then the big bunch at the Highlands.
Bay Harbor is the one. That was another one like Eagle Crest here, where I saw it right from the very beginning as a cement factory, and then transformed into. They brought. I think they were 9-hole courses at the time they were first brought in.
Well, they call up the quarry, and there are actually they have 2 18-hole courses now, but the first one, which you saw the tower go down, that was the quarry.
Those were beautiful courses. They were, they always did a great job on their courses.
Well, you can see, the bay out there.
Well, yeah, and then of course they created their own harbor. And that being a boater, of course, that was of interest as well. The other one that was really kind of interesting, it's a little town in Michigan, Concord, and it was Concord Golf and Country Club. Just a little course. Because I was a short hole golfer, I didn't like the 500-yard holes. I liked the 200, 250. Something that was at least 2 shots away. But I think that was always one of my favorite courses. And of course, Eagle Crest here, like I had mentioned, seeing it right from the very beginning. Eagle Sticks in Zanesville. I got to tell you a story about this one. Art says, it's like way over there. It's a long trip, okay? And I think I put more miles on my van because the crew used to travel with us. And we got there, got into Zanesville, found the golf course, and you couldn't see the course. It was a parking lot, and it looked like a dump. You know, I thought, Art has finally done it to us. You know, he has just now, he has done it to us. So Larry said, okay, look, let's get a cart and let's take a look at the course, see what it looks like. Well, we popped up over the hill, and Larry and I looked at each other, and it's, oh my God, you got to be kidding me. It was the most gorgeous course I've ever seen in my life. There were flowers all over the place. The bridges that went across creeks were the old corn crib things. It was stunning. It was hard to find a shot that I wanted to set up at because they were all great. And so that's probably one of my favorite experiences with Art, thinking that, boy, he really screwed us when in fact I think it probably was by far, with flowers and everything else out there, one of the prettiest courses that I'd ever shot.
Well, Tom, I think this plane has landed. The door is opening up, and we're finished with this segment.
I'm glad it stayed closed. Thanks, Jack. It's fun.
It's Tom Durant, and I'm Jack Berry, and we're here at Eagle Crest Resort at Eastern Michigan University.